welcome back to this week's edition of Manch Talk. I'm Tammy Simmons, I'm your host for the week, and I'm joined today by Representative Victoria Sullivan, who represents Ward 9 right here in Manchester. For those of you who have not seen the show before, I like to think that I'm bringing you the good, the bad, and the ugly about what goes on in and around Manchester. The good thing is it's summertime. It's beautiful out. There's no reason why everybody shouldn't get outside, go for a walk. If you've never kayaked before, you can go up to Edgewater Canoe and kayak. Try out kayaking. They're right just over the Manchester border in Hooksett on Edgewater Drive for $12 a day. If you go to Cooptopia.com, you can get a coupon for $12 for a whole day's worth of kayaking. Get out, enjoy the Merrimack River, enjoy the beautiful places in Manchester, enjoy the summertime. The good, the bad, the ugly. Things got kind of ugly at the State House this week, I'd say. For those who don't know, we were called back into session this week by the Speaker of the House to re-vote on a bill that's been labeled Granite Hammer. That bill had been voted down a few weeks earlier. It failed just by one vote, but it did fail, and we did what we call a reconsideration, and we chose not to reconsider it. It should have by all means been dead. But the Speaker, for whatever reason, felt the need to bring us back and pressure people to...
I think he called it intervening circumstances.
Intervening circumstances.
He said the Senate was decided they were not coming back at all, and then there were intervening circumstances that made them change their mind to come back for this.
I wonder if the intervening circumstances have an office in the corner of the State House.
And that was said on the House floor, so that's readily available to anybody.
So last Thursday, the state spent $16,000 to bring us all back into session. We did vote on some veto overrides, which all failed. So apparently we don't have the support in the Republican majority to override the governor.
Nope.
But we were asked to suspend the rules because one of the things that people may not realize is when we go to the State House, the very first thing we do when we start a session is we vote on the rules. And the rules don't allow us to bring back a bill that we've already voted down.
Right.
And that kind of makes sense because we could rehash and rehash and rehash. Interestingly enough, about a month ago, we had a bill that came over from the Senate that directly impacted Manchester. We wanted to trial an electronic polling system so that people, when they go to the polls on Election Day, instead of flipping through those green bar printouts of the names, they could check in on an iPad.
Right.
It was just enabling legislation. The Senate amended a bill and drafted the legislation. And when I brought it to the House floor, we were not even allowed to take a vote to suspend the rules to allow it. Speaker Jasper had sent it, he said, to the state archives. I do not ever recall any bill being sent to the state archives before. Why it was so important to not allow the House to have the opportunity to suspend the rules is beyond me. But so in that instance, no suspension of the rule vote is allowed. In this instance, suspension of the rule, intervening circumstances.
Well, we also vote on a calendar. There's a calendar that we go by.
Yes.
And the calendar says when bills can begin to come in and be accepted. When the end date for them to be in committee, introduced into committee, the end date for them to be introduced to the House, then we have crossover, and then we've got dates for committee of conference, which involves the Senate, and that's it. When it's done, it's done. So at the end of this, now remember we had the Special Drug Task Force.
Right, which we already had a task force that just looked at a bunch of bills and decided
they
which ones
expedited bills.
Which we already did.
And all of that, for some reason, wasn't enough, and we had to come in after we were told we were done.
Right.
People went on vacation, because you saw about a third of the people weren't there.
Right, there were a lot of people who, I know Representative Ober down in Hudson, she scheduled surgery. Right. Because we were told we weren't coming back till October.
Yep.
So she scheduled surgery on a Thursday when we weren't going to be in session.
And school's out.
And school is out, and she
parents
wasn't
have
able to come in.
To take care of.
Right.
And which, is okay if the calendar says you're going to be here until July. You make those plans accordingly. But when you're told you're done on June
1st, I think it was June 1st.
Yeah, June 1st. Then you start to get on with your summer. And so, like I said, we had about a third. In the beginning, we were about half full.
Yep.
And then we filled into being about a third empty.
Yep.
And so then things just got ugly after that.
Did.
Because a lot of people this isn't right. The bill was killed. Whether you believed in the bill or not,
We have a process. We live by the rules. We die by the rules.
And what is the precedent for this? So any
There was
person
no
that doesn't
precedent.
get their way can now
Right.
just have a hissy fit until they get their way.
Right.
And that's not how we do things.
Right, because otherwise we may never go home for the summer. We could just keep getting brought back for a different bill. What
Which
if
is-
2 weeks from now we get brought back on another bill?
And that's basically what we were told that
Right.
day, is that if we did not agree to suspend the rules then the governor would call us back in July, and this would continue until this bill was passed.
Right. So for about 2 hours on Thursday morning, the legislature debated back and forth about suspending the rules. You know, I did my fair share of debating.
Yeah. And people demanded that the bill be heard, because what we do is we legislate, and we needed to have the debate on this bill because that was what was fair to our constituents.
Right, we have to suspend the rules to allow the debate, even though the debate had been already done and voted on June. But okay, that was their argument, is that we have to allow debate. They argued that this was impending because the opioid crisis. You know, one rep got up there and talked about somebody coming into her town clerk's office upset because their child had died, and you know, it's horrific. But all morning long, all we heard about was opioid crisis, opioid crisis, opioid crisis. Not diminishing the opioid crisis, but
no.
this is what the argument was.
Or those families,
we have to
the
debate
pain of those families, it's
merits
awful.
of the bill, and it's all because of the opioid crisis. Representative Infantine, also from Manchester here, got up, and whether I don't agree with him, but he made a case that a few years back we came back to a session after we were done to do some funding for heating assistance, because we had a terrible winter and people were struggling. The difference, though, was that was never legislation that was voted down. That was new legislation. So it really wasn't from my perspective, it really wasn't a
Right.
equal argument. But he got up and made the argument that we needed to debate. This wasn't the first time. So eventually we took a vote.
But I think in that situation, too, there were new circumstances
There were
that
new
were
circumstances,
created.
and there was no old bill. It
Right.
wasn't like we had voted down heating assistance and then we came back and voted on the same legislation. So eventually, 2 hours into it, the vote on rule suspension happened, and about 97 people voted no. I think all but 4 were Republicans. So if anybody at home is hearing that Republicans did vote for suspension, it was pretty much split. I would say the conservative House Republican Alliance, pro-liberty Republicans voted no on suspension, and leadership voted yes, for the most part. There was some little bit of crossover, but not much. Even uglier, so now we've suspended the rules. Not only did we suspend the rules to allow late submission of this bill, we suspended the rules that didn't require that we have a public hearing,
Right.
that any committee hear this bill. We
Right.
just went right from drafting to vote.
Right.
So the very next motion, and this is when it really became apparent that there was a game plan on the part of leadership, was to limit debate. Now,
15 minutes.
to 15 minutes. Now, after speaking afterwards with Representative Infantine, who did vote to limit debate, he believed it was the same type of limit debate motion that we've had in the past. We do this from time to time when we're under a tight deadline and you've got 120 bills, and if you just do the math, you have to rein people in. He presumed it was 15 minutes on the bill itself and 15 minutes on each amendment that would be brought forward, and then 15 minutes on the final vote. But it wasn't.
No.
It was 15 minutes, and it specifically said, and on the no side, that will include all amendments. Now, at that point, there was probably 10, maybe 12 amendments that were waiting to be released because you couldn't get an amendment drafted
Right.
until the bill passed.
Right.
So everything was in limbo.
Because there was no bill. So
There was no bill to amend at that
So
point.
like I put an amendment, and I was told that I could not pick up the amendment to bring to the House until after the vote to introduce the bill. So we had to suspend the rules, vote to introduce HB 1000, and then go down
Run down
to
the
Legislative Services, grab the amendment, bring it up, and somehow get it to 400 people. So
Right.
they decided to just skip the process of getting the amendments to 400 people,
Right.
and
And go
decided
to
to start
limit debate.
reading
Right.
them.
The very first amendment, they read to us. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to vote on an amendment that I just once heard. And I don't even know 100% what was in that amendment. I'm sure now I could get a copy, but when I had to push a button and
Right.
choose, I do know that one of the aspects of it was $15,000 to the Department of Corrections to help offset the cost that would be involved in all these new arrests that this 1.5 million was going to.
And that was Representative Burt's amendment, and things got so confused. I ended up going up and asking to motion for a recess so we could get those amendments distributed, because his was already being read, his amendment. He did not get that privilege, although the rest of us did. We recessed after that, but I got so confused I actually voted against him. Right. And I didn't mean to. I got back to my seat. It was hurried, and I actually and it was actually a good amendment, but it didn't matter because my vote didn't matter at that point.
I just want to jump back just 1 second. So on the limiting debate, so after they voted to limit debate, it became apparent. So for 2 hours, the argument was, we have to do this so that we can debate, and then the very next motion is no debate.
Right.
So there were a variety of amendments brought forward. It wasn't out of the ordinary. This is what happens at the end of session. Things that are not germane but have already previously passed the House are amendable. There was two on, one was on constitutional carry, one was on concealed carry. There was one on Griffin's Law, which is regarding fetal homicide. There was John Burt's. You had one on the drug take-back program.
Yep, which made it through the House by a voice vote, and then it was killed in the Senate. And it's basically what, after it was killed in the Senate, basically Manchester picked up the ball with it, and that's what we have with the safe stations.
Right, so we had a piece of legislation that would have created safe stations when we passed it in the House.
There was only one other, and there's one missing link, I think, to this safe stations, is that the drug take-back program would have also given them the opportunity to provide a drop box for any drugs and paraphernalia.
So you could just walk away.
Right, because right now, do you know you can't pick up a needle off the street and put it anywhere?
Well, that was one of the did Joe?
Joe had the needle take back.
Right, the needle take back as an amendment because Joe
needle
Hannon,
exchange. Yeah.
Right, he had it as an amendment that if you. Right now, if I find a hypodermic needle on the ground and I pick it up,
you can now get arrested for heroin.
Can be arrested for heroin possession. So.
And no one can. You can't. So we're talking about it's summer.
Right.
It's beautiful out.
Right.
You want to take your kids to the lake. You want to enjoy Manchester.
But you see a hypodermic.
My kids went fishing with my husband today, and I said, "Take your water shoes." And they said, "Well, we don't want to bring them." Well, I don't want you stepping on a needle.
Right.
And that's really a concern right now because they're in the parks. It's in the water because you can't take them anywhere.
Right. Well, I mean, you just don't know, and you just don't know when you're going to come across something. And it's crazy to think that even somebody in a hospital, like even if a nurse has a hypodermic needle, finds one, she could be charged with felony heroin possession. It's crazy. So that bill didn't pass. And the only other amendment was Joe Hannon also had an amendment to put a specific sunset clause to make this only go for 1 year.
And to reevaluate it
at that point. So that's a very reasonable amendment.
Right.
So every single amendment brought forward by Republicans on Republican issues was spoken against by leadership and said that we can't amend the bill for any of these things because we have to keep a clean bill in order for, I'm assuming, the governor to sign it. Then I did get up at one point because I had heard grumblings because people had other floor amendments. There were people who had floor amendments dealing with treatment. There was somebody who wanted to shift the $1.5 million to treatment. There were a variety of amendments that were being drafted to deal with treatment versus just with law enforcement. I asked the speaker if it was true that those amendments dealing with treatment in the opioid crisis were being ruled non-germane to the bill dealing with opioid crisis. And he very clearly stated at that point
that this is not about the opioid crisis. I remember it
This is about Granite Hammer.
He also made a remark that, so none of my constituents, as you know, came out
and either.
In one way or another regarding this bill, which I get phone calls and emails a lot. My constituents come to me, which I love. I love hearing from them. And nobody contacted me about this. And it was news. I mean, it was out there. So I put it out there. I put it on Facebook and said, I haven't heard from anybody. And I really want to know what you think about this because this is important.
Right.
This is an important issue.
It's one of those issues that it's hard to know. There was no defining yes or no vote, I don't think. I don't think neither of us are anti-cop,
No.
despite what some people would have people
No.
believe. So you want to help law enforcement, but you also
Right.
want to make sure that, we're using funds wisely. And if we're going to spend 1.5 million, is this the best way to spend it?
And overwhelmingly, my constituent, and I screenshotted this entire conversation to make sure that I had it for future reference. Overwhelmingly, my constituents said, no more money for law enforcement until we have some way to help these addicts, because we're arresting low-level possession.
Well, you were posting the police blog, which I found very interesting, and I've
Right.
seen a couple different people who are gathering, the data. The majority of people who are being arrested aren't
Right.
even possessing heroin.
So we had 6. No. It's like marijuana and one.
Was it an inhalant or
In
something?
7 days, there were 6 drug-related arrests. One of them was for trying to sell and didn't say what. 4 of them were just possession of like marijuana and low-level things. And one of them was for inhaling. I didn't know inhaling something was illegal until I read that, actually. So, what they're saying, the Granite Hammer is to go after just the big guys. And Manchester has been doing Granite Hammer.
Right.
Chief Willard came out and said he's been using money to pay cops overtime based on salary money he had available because he didn't have a full complement.
Right.
He said that to MUR.
Right.
And that by July he will have a full complement. So we're already doing Granite Hammer. And what we're seeing is not
6
the
people
big guy
in a 7-day
getting
period
arrested.
is not...
No, and we have that situation where we had that homeless gentleman that was
gonna
arrested because he had
marijuana possession.
He got put in county. They gave him bail
He
of
got put in Valley
$100.
Street, which is our county
Right.
jail. Our county jail. I don't know if people realize. Some people think
Okay.
that Valley is for Manchester. Valley Street Jail is our county jail for males.
Right.
Anyways, I'm sorry.
So no, he had just like a joint on him.
Yeah.
And he got put in there. His bail was $100. He's homeless. He didn't have $100. The result was he died of a fentanyl overdose in jail.
5 days later.
We
So
cannot. Right. So it wasn't in his system when he went in.
fentanyl in the jail
Right.
after we put him there for having a joint.
So if we can't keep, and his isn't the only story.
No,
like this.
he just happened to actually die
Right.
in jail.
And if we can't keep the drugs out of the prisons, why are we arresting these low-level, I don't mean low-level people. I mean the crime is a low-level crime. Putting them in prison where they can get drugs easier, and then we release them.
They're
with
still addicted.
no treatment.
So if you are addicted and you go into the Valley Street Jail, you can still keep getting
Right.
your drugs. And then when you get released from Valley Street Jail, guess what? You're still addicted.
Right.
So we're not ending the circle of addiction.
So they
Ever.
had a public forum, not so much a hearing, but a forum about this bill the day before we voted on it. And Joe Hannon,
Again, during when people are off with their kids and on
during the day,
scheduled vacations and can't be there.
and it's not how we usually conduct our hearing anyway. And then there'd be executive committee. There's a process that was completely bypassed, which the original bill went through and was killed. So Joe Hannon and a couple other reps got up, David Bates, and they made some really great points. And they asked some poignant questions. And one was, okay, so we're already putting millions of dollars into law enforcement.
Right.
People really want better access to rehabilitation and help. Because otherwise,
People
we're
wanna
going
stop
in
the
circles,
addiction
right?
so
Catch
that
and
we-
release, catch and release. So they actually asked the chiefs, we had 5 chiefs there, I think, and said, how often are you rearresting the same people? And they said, far too often. Right? Then I think it was Chief Willard went on to say that they go to the same house 5 or 6 times a day to administer Narcan.
Right. And I supported the Narcan thing, but
day.
I don't think that was the intention.
But that's what
I wanted Narcan so
Right.
that, if you're a 19-year-old kid and you're just for whatever reason caught up in this opioid thing,
I understand.
we're not going to just let you die.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we're
And
going
as
to come
people
back
say,
and-
if it's your child.
Right, because
you know?
I can't imagine a parent who's lost a child, especially if they had no idea, or there's stories about people who've gone for help and they just it's awful. It's terrible.
it is awful.
It is a crisis. I just don't know if it's a
Right. And then some of the other questions that they asked, I'm trying to think. That conversation's being lose my train of thought.
questions at the hearing with the chiefs. They said, I know somebody told me that they said that when they arrest one dealer,
That was it.
it just
I'm
fills
sorry.
back in on
That
the
was
backside.
exactly
So
where I
you're
was
just
going.
it's like plugging a swimming pool hole. It just comes in another hole.
Right. So we had apparently, and this is all, people can downstream this from the New Hampshire General Court website. It was the hearing that was on the 15th of June.
Yep.
And it's all there for you to see. So one of the chiefs, I believe it's Chief Willard, said that we had two symbiotic gangs. Gangs are not good, but for somehow they were working together, and there was enough, demand for the drugs that they could both be here without problems. So apparently they arrested one of the gangs or several members of the gang. It kind of dissolved. A worse gang came in from Lawrence that did not want to work with the other gang,
so
and hence all the shootings on the west side. So that's why we've had more shootings on the west side than we had in the last 20 days.
Because it's gang on gang. It's not random. It's not people shooting random people. It is gang on gang. It's specific.
And that was scary to me.
Because we're not making it better. We're making it worse for the residents.
Right. And, I've got children, and we enjoy the city. And I don't want it to become 10 years ago. Yeah, 10 years ago, more, remember? It was with cocaine.
Right, there's always some...
We had the gangs, and it got bad, and the Guardian Angels came in, and then Frank Ginta came in, and the city got much better, and now we're headed back down this other path, and law enforcement has a job.
They do.
They have a job.
They have a job that you couldn't pay me enough to do.
Nope, and they're right now swimming upstream, and they're grasping at straws, because what do you do when you're drowning? Like, you're grabbing at anything, and I completely understand that they would want support for this bill, and they'll take any money or any funds that they can. But we, on the outside, the legislators, need to find other ways
to alleviate the problem. I don't know that this bill, in case anybody's wondering, does two things. The funding for this is only allowed for two specific things. The forensics lab, which apparently is very backlogged, which more than one representative did come up and say there's $576,000 in the drug forfeiture fund that very much could be given. If the AG wanted, they could give that money to the forensics lab now to get them out of the hole. And the other one is for overtime for police, not for new officers, not for new equipment, not for anything, just for overtime. And it can't shift funds. It doesn't mean you can take budgeted overtime funds and fund it with this so that you can fund something else. It has to be for new overtime. So we're going to take the same cops that are struggling. I can't imagine working 40 hours having to deal with people that you have to administer Narcan to all for 40 hours. And then now the solution is, so you can just work extra. We'll just pay you to work extra.
Right.
So, needless to say, the bill went on. Every amendment that the Republicans brought forward were defeated, and ultimately, Granite Hammer was passed with 74 Republicans voting against in the end. Since then, as you said, different people have come out. I reached out to my constituents. I saw what you had done, and I thought, this is a good thing, because I checked my email and I don't see any. I did get emails. They all said vote no. Everybody on my Facebook page said vote no. Anytime anybody wants to reach out to their legislators before they vote, they should.
Well, Tammy, I don't think that you think about it the right way, because our Speaker of the House, Sean Jasper, got up and said constituents don't matter.
Yeah, he said we shouldn't be voting what our constituents want. Right. That's not our job.
It doesn't matter if 2, 3, 4, or dozens contact you.
Right.
You don't have
We don't have to support. We don't have to vote the way
they
You're
are. There to make the decision for them.
I know that they are electing me to go and vote on their behalf, and I make decisions without contacting each and every one of them on each and every bill. But when there's a big popular bill out there that I'm not hearing anything from, and then when I do get a handful of responses, they all say, please don't vote for this.
Right. So what is the point of asking people to reach out to your legislators when things that are important come up?
If we're supposed to ignore them.
Right, exactly.
So then, since then, it was about 3-4 days ago. So now the online debate starts, and you've got I've got constituents who didn't contact me before are angry that I reached out to my constituents. I don't know why that was so offensive, but they did. And interesting, I saw a post this morning which I just still shaking my head over. Speaker Jasper commented that I had no idea what I was talking about, basically, because the average citizen in New Hampshire doesn't pay taxes into the general fund. So if you're watching this, if you thought you were paying taxes, silly you. You don't pay taxes into the general fund. The Speaker of the House told me so. Now, I did go online this morning because I'm pretty sure I pay taxes.
Right.
We pay a gas tax. We pay real estate transfer taxes. We pay vehicle taxes. We pay rooms and meals taxes. We pay among the highest rooms and meals taxes in the area. We pay interest and dividend taxes, BET taxes, BPT taxes, communications tax, electricity consumption taxes, statewide education property taxes, and tobacco taxes.
Right.
If the Speaker of the House does not think that my average constituent is paying taxes, I'm kind of at a loss at how to even debate that, because I eat out. I pay 9% rooms and meals. We paid 9% rooms and meals tax on the way here when we stopped at
Right.
Ridge Cafe to get a coffee. I consider myself to be an average person.
Right.
I don't, you know,
And you're going to pay it this weekend when you go camping.
know that we did away with the camping tax, but I will pay it on food. So anyways, this is the ugly side of politics. Sometimes we do really good things at the State House. Sometimes we just fight to stop really bad things. Maybe the $1.5 million will turn out to be this wonderful thing that somehow, you know, put a plug in the hole that we're draining.
But I will tell you, the most troubling part about this was that we received so much influence from the outside that were not our constituents. There was so much pressure to vote on this. You were just a bad person.
Yeah,
you
you were
hated
evil.
your city. You hated police.
Yes.
And it had nothing to do with
No.
that. It had to do with the fact that we're losing this battle.
Yes.
We've lost it since the 70s. And here we are
Yeah,
again,
this-
because this is not new. And we need to find new ways. They kept saying it's a three-legged stool and
Yep.
education and law enforcement and treatment.
Well-
But we're not. It's not. It's a centipede.
Yeah,
And we
it is.
have to
Well,
reach
I mean,
out everywhere and
a
try
good
everything.
A good example is year after year, more and more of the legislature votes to decriminalize simple possession of marijuana. It doesn't impact my life at all. But you know what? If we're arresting 6 people a week and 4 of them are for simple marijuana possession, maybe we could free up our court system. Maybe we could free up the police. Maybe we could free up our jail space. And maybe we could shift and focus on the really critical problems, because I just don't think that people with possessing a single joint should go to the Valley Street Jail and die of
No.
a fentanyl overdose.
I don't either. And it's a
So.
very disheartening situation. And I hope that we find some solutions together.
Well,
soon.
I know with it being gorgeous out, and I know you'll probably do the same thing. Dan Garthwaite and I will be running for state rep in Ward 10, and we actually are looking forward to going out and knocking on doors, because I love talking to the people in my ward, because a lot of times they have a different view of things than I do. They have ideas that I never thought of. It's invigorating. I find that I'm more in line with people than sometimes you think.
Right.
And there's nothing better than hearing from somebody who has a different perspective on an issue than I. So I know you'll be doing the same thing.
I will. I enjoy it. I go out with my children because my husband's usually working when we go out to do that. But I take my 2 boys out, and they're good to take because they're young.
Yep.
And when I want to give up because I'm tired, they say, "One more street, Mom."
Yep.
And we've got a lot of
It is,
hills
and
in
it's
Ward
nice,
9.
and you get to spend time outdoors, so it's wonderful.
It is.
Well, that's about all that we have time for. I do want to make one quick shout out, because I promised somebody I would shout out to them last time and I forgot. Sam Eaton at Fan Connects did my opening thing, and I did want to recommend
Sam's a
him.
good guy.
You can visit his website at FAN. Oh, now I knew I'd get it wrong. FANCONX.com. So shout out to Sam Eaton. Thank you very much for helping me with that. If you want to send me an email about what we should talk about on a future show, if you have any questions or you don't know how to reach Victoria or myself, you can email me at manchtalk@gmail.com. That's manchtalk, all one word. You can also follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter, and we'll have all our shows
And you
on
can
YouTube.
get any contact information for any state rep on the New Hampshire General Court website.
I'm sure Victoria will be back with me again soon.
Well, it goes
because
so fast. A half
I
hour is
know, a half
fast.
hour is not enough for the 2 of us.
I know.
We'll have other issues to talk about. I'm sure once we start talking to constituents, I'll have you back and we'll talk more about what we're hearing on the streets. In the meantime, get out there, enjoy Manchester, enjoy the beautiful places in Manchester, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.